From the moment that the attack took place at Camp Ashraf on September 1st, there has been, for all intents and purposes, within the confines of the United States State Department, a determination not to impute any responsibility or obligation on the government of Iraq, despite every ounce of evidence to the contrary. That attack was a dastardly crime against humanity that was committed by and on behalf of the government of Iraq against the innocent people who were there merely to protect the possessions of the people at Camp Liberty under the very eyes of the United Nations. In any other circumstance, there would be such an outcry by the United States government against that attack that we would have demanded that people be held responsible, that there would be an absolute obligation for an investigation. But officials in the State Department say, oh no, it wasn't the government of Iraq that was responsible for that dastardly attack. Oh no, it was not the government of Iraq that was taking orders from the mullahs in Iran that orchestrated that attack. And yet, the evidence has slowly but securely piled up. One ounce of evidence after the another has now turned into an irrefutable conclusion that the government of Iraq was indeed responsible for the attack, and, more importantly, the taking of 7 hostages that the State Department, in the guise of a Deputy Assistant Secretary, Mr. McGurk, claims are no longer in Iraq. Somehow or other, our State Department has got it into its unfortunate belief that the United States has far more to gain to engage in a cover-up of the facts involving the attack at Camp Ashraf, and they denying repeatedly that the 7 hostages that were taken are no longer in Iraq. Mr. McGurk has appeared before several committees of Congress to repeatedly attempt to refute any evidence to the contrary in an effort to protect and avoid placing the responsibility on the government of Iraq. And yet, just yesterday, no less an independent, and I underline, a respected independent organization that is highly respected around the world, Amnesty International, issued an urgent report that essentially confirmed what we have been saying from the day that the attack occurred and those hostages were taken hostage, and that is that the hostages are still in Iraq. So I asked Mr. McGurk a question. Mr. McGurk, I, as a former United States ambassador, would want to at least protect the integrity and reputation of the United States government and not engage in further subterfuge in order to protect a government that is not necessarily aligned with the United States' interest in trying to resolve this humanitarian conflict. Wouldn't you, Mr. McGurk, want to at least now recognize? Wouldn't you want to accept the fact that no less an independent and respected organization as Amnesty International is denying your constant accusations that those hostages are no longer in Iraq, and indeed is prepared to confirm that they have independent evidence that those hostages are in Iraq? I call on you, Mr. McGurk, to come up to Congress and to apologize to the American people for continuing to peddle the fiction that they are no longer there.
While you are here, your friends, your loved ones, they're halfway across the world, and they're in constant oppression and turmoil and fear from, I think, several governments. Since 2009, there have been 5 assaults, attacks on your friends and your neighbors and your loved ones in Camp Liberty and Camp Ashraf. 5 attacks. And during that period of time, not one person responsible for those attacks has been brought to justice. Not the killers and not the governments who allowed it to happen. This ought not to be. In this latest attack, you all are aware of it, the one that took place in September. There were 42 that survived. Witnesses. I used to be a prosecutor before I was a judge in Texas. And it was just elementary that you talk to the witnesses of a crime. None of these witnesses have been talked to about who committed this crime. Why not? It is an obligation that they be talked to find out who did it. Because you see, this 5th attack is like the other 4. The culprits who came in with machine guns, killing people, assassinating unarmed Iranian dissidents. When they came in, not any of them were held accountable when they left after their massacre of your friends and your neighbors. So not all is well in the world. But we give thanks in this country for you being here and putting up the fight and the resistance against oppression halfway across the world, where your friends and your neighbors and your loved ones are fighting as well. So we thank you in this great land. This fight is not over. It is not going away, even though many governments just wish you would go away. It's not going to happen. We're not going to let it happen. And in this in this latest assault, this is what I think ought to happen. I'll say this to begin with. I've been called a lot of things in my life, but I've never been called a diplomat. So I'm not very diplomatic about what I say. But I think while we're talking to Maliki, when we had the chance, and he comes over here to the United States dragging the sack, wanting to get some more of that American money, we had the chance, and we should have taken it, to look him straight in the eye and say, look at here. That's one word. Look at here. You turn over those captive hostages that are in the possession of Iraq. You determine who committed this crime. You arrest those people, or there's no American money going to you, Mr. Maliki.